This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the 310th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I believe heartily in and know the value of writing first drafts quickly. When I write quickly, I'm less likely to overcensor myself, I definitely chew through the story faster, and I always have more fun. I know that. And yet I still sometimes get sucked into the bad habits of dawdly, overconscious first draft writing. That's definitely been a pitfall for me this year in writing Wayfarer. So I've instituted a new writing plan. Write 300 words every 15 minutes, which makes for 1,200 words every hour. Sounds a little overwhelming, but it's actually not. I know from past experience that I am perfectly capable of knocking out 1,500 good words in an hour. So breaking that down into fourths and holding myself accountable every 15 minutes is not an unreasonable goal. And so far, it's been doing an awesome job of keeping me on target, focused, and, let's hear it, yeah, baby, productive. So give it a try, and if you want some added incentive, check out Dr. Wicked's Write or Die app. The latest post in the video series on my blog is foreshadowing and misdirection. Use them together to empower your fiction. It shows you how to balance foreshadowing and misdirection in your fiction to create resonance without giving away your story's ending. To find the post, visit my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And now I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast entitled, Your Fiction May Be Failing for One Simple Reason. You're not being honest. Writers talk a lot about being honest, being vulnerable, pouring ourselves into our writing, and not being self-conscious in our writing. But what does all that really mean? And how can failing at any of the above be the reason your fiction may be failing? Let's begin by asking the obvious question. What is honest fiction? What does that even mean? It's a buzzword, but all that means is that it has essentially become a cliche. Often cliches have deep meanings that everyone fails to see simply because we're so used to not looking past the surface. So, honest fiction is, number one, truthful fiction. Nobel Prize-winning author Albert Camus famously said, "Fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth." Good fiction is always going to be true fiction. Honesty in fiction begins by presenting premises, situations, reactions, and ramifications that are true not only in the sense that the necessary facts are correct, but also true in a way that resonates with the universal reality of morality. This has nothing to do with the character making prescribed right choices, and everything to do with presenting the effects and costs of those choices with authenticity and candor. Number two, honest fiction is fiction that has nothing to do with personal convictions. There's a Chinese proverb that says there are three truths: your truth, my truth, and the truth. Honesty in fiction is never about presenting your truth. It's about presenting the truth by first being true to your character's truths. This means that if your story has you putting words into the mouth of someone whose principles and convictions are antithetical to your own, you must still be able to present that character's ideals in a completely authentic way. Do you hate your bad guy? If so, you're not doing a good job of writing him. To write a character well, to write him honestly, we must be able to put ourselves into their skins and brains and understand them so completely, even in their objective reprehensibility, that we can love them even as we love ourselves. This absolutely doesn't mean you have to agree with him or condone his actions, but it does mean you have to step away from the subjectivity of your own personal pulpit and instead try to write from his subjective perspective. Number three, honest fiction is personal fiction. You know how you're always being told to write what you know? That line of advice isn't talking about writing stories based only on your life experiences. All write what you know really means is be honest. This is where all those encouragements to fight through and be vulnerable in your writing come into play. Why? Because being honest in your fiction means digging down into the core of yourself and finding the part of you that understands and resonates with sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes embarrassing, sometimes downright scary stuff. Being honest and vulnerable doesn't mean you have to tell all your deepest, darkest secrets. It doesn't mean you have to tell everyone about the time you went sleepwalking in your underwear. But it does mean that when you write about your characters experiencing any kind of emotion, whether it's a good or a bad emotion, you have to be able to dig down within yourself and tap into that embarrassment or whatever that you felt and use it to convey your character's similar experience without censorship. When most of us hear the admonitions to write honest fiction, we all nod our heads emphatically. Yep, that is so important. I totally believe in being honest in my fiction. I, for one, nod my head. I'm emphatic. But if I'm being really sincere with myself, I have to admit that writing honest fiction is way harder than just pinning on the honesty merit badge. It's not something we accomplish just because we believe in it. Honesty in fiction is ridiculously hard work. It only happens when we're actively thinking about it and consciously pursuing it with every word we write. Part of the reason this is so tricky is that honesty in fiction isn't always the most expedient way to serve the plot, have fun, or entertain readers. In an October 2015 interview with the writer, playwright and screenwriter Donald Margulies notes that sometimes we can unintentionally create a jarring note within the honesty of our work simply by adding scenes, lines of dialogue, or jokes that are at odds with the honesty of the piece, but which we have a hard time deleting because they give us a personal kind of pleasure. In other words, we're not killing our darlings. He says, "The thing that I absolutely live by is you have to tell the truth." I know that sounds very simplistic, but I think that if you're enjoying yourself too much and you're intruding too much on a character or the voice of a character, or if you find that you're stepping back from that character in that situation and you're commenting on it, you're not doing your job. You need to be as true and as empathic to that moment as possible. You can't be at a remove. I want to be honest in my fiction, but I admit it. Most of the time, I just write. The character is doing something or saying something, and I'm just letting the words pour out without necessarily pausing to check how honest they are. But every once in a while, a scene comes along that demands I dig a little deeper. One of those scenes, irrevocably burned into my memory, is the midpoint battle scene in my Portal Fantasy Dreamlander. A critique partner had told me the early versions of this scene just weren't cutting it. They were too surface, too bland, too ordinary. I needed to dig deeper. Instead of starting to write right away, I sat there for a few moments and thought. This was a scene in which my protagonist was entering a full-scale battle for the first time. His reaction to this experience was not in itself crucial to the story, but realistically, this was a life-changing event. It wasn't honest of me to allow him to breeze through the experience without his undergoing some massive reactions. So I asked myself, if I were the one riding into this battle, what would I be feeling? The result was one of the best scenes I've ever written. My editor loved it, my critique partners loved it. It's the scene, more than any other, that is always mentioned specifically in reviews. I dug deep, I was honest, and it resonated with readers. Plot whisperer Martha Alderson tweeted recently, "Dig for truth in writing. Often what first comes is surface, what you've been taught / picked up from others. Authentic truth is deeper." My surface reaction to that battle scene in Dreamlander was to write the stock action hero stuff where the character is tough and awesome and nothing phases him. The authentic truth was that he would be overwhelmed by the sensory stimuli to the point that he would be almost at a remove from it, as if he were an observer of his own actions. I think about that scene often, and not because it turned out so great, but rather because it remains a reminder and a challenge to me to always go that extra mile, to dig a little deeper and look beyond the easy surface cliches to find the honest emotional truth at the heart of all my scenes. If you're ever worried your fiction may be failing, challenge yourself to search out the truth, big or small, in every scene you write. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.